What's going on, everybody? I am so happy that you tuned in to this first edition of the Taste Talk Patreon edition, right? These are specifically for the lovely people who have decided to be patrons. I love you all. Thank you so much. So this is exclusive content. Nobody else is going to get this, and I hope you enjoy. I wanted to break down this whole Kavanaugh hearing, or Kavanaugh, as Angela Rye says, right? So we're gonna get into this mess, this entire mess surrounding his confirmation and his hearing. And of course, as we all know now, he is Justice Brett Kavanaugh, no longer just judge. He is now on the Supreme Court. So let's break this down. Y'all ready? Let go.
What is the strongest memory you have? Strongest memory of the incident, something that you cannot forget. Take whatever time you need.
Indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter, the uproarious laughter between the two, and they're having fun at my expense.
You've never forgotten that laughter. You've never forgotten them laughing at you.
They were laughing with each other.
And you were the object of the laughter?
I was, underneath one of them while the two laughed. Two friends having a really good time with one another.
Indelible in the hippocampus. Ooh, that thing stuck with me. But I like a good portion of the United States watched the continuation of the hearing of Supreme Court nominee, or then Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. Right? For the rest of this talk, we are going to call him Kavanaugh, as in N-A-W, as in oh nah. But Thursday, September 27th wasn't just another boring day of questions and answers. It was the testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey-Ford, a professor of psychology at Palo Alto University and a research psychologist at the Stanford University School of Medicine, who had accused Judge Kavanaugh of attempted rape. Although she never wanted to come forth publicly, she wanted to tell her story, as she believed it was her civic duty to do so. So in her opening statement Thursday, she said this:
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school.
She's terrified. She said she did not want to be here. She was terrified. Doesn't sound like a Democratic ploy to me. But Dr. Ford went through a process, and this is one of the reasons why I believe her. Because of the steps that she took to come forward. She, like anybody else, could have gone straight to the media and they would have ate that story up. She could have went to the Washington Post herself. She could have went to Don Lemon. She could have went to anybody on CNN, anybody on MSNBC, nobody on Fox because they're all brainwashed. But she could have went to a credible news outlet, and I say credible in air quotes, and told her story. But she went through a specific process. She said she went to her local congresswoman, called the confidential tip line of the Washington Post after she had been notified that Kavanaugh was on the short list for the Supreme Court. So once she knew this information, she felt she needed to come forward. And when she did, she asked that her name be kept out of it. After notifying her congresswoman, a letter was written and sent to Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is her senator, or at least one of them. I'll talk about that later. She sent a letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein, who happens to sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Again, one of her senators. Again, she wanted to be left out of it. So after sending her letter to Senator Feinstein, her name was found out by the press. And after being hounded by the press, that is when she finally came forward publicly and told her story to the Washington Post. Now, point of information here, let's sidetrack for a little bit. When we're dealing with Supreme Court nominees, these are some of the most vetted and investigated positions ever. The FBI does an extensive background check on the nominee. However, they only go back 18 years, and they only investigate matters that come up within the course of said investigation. So with that being said, it doesn't matter that he's been investigated 6 times. The allegations are different and wouldn't have come up in either of the 6 investigations. Got that? Okay, let's move forward. So regardless of any of that, the allegations were made public, not by Feinstein's office. Nonetheless, the American people have now already heard about the allegations that Dr. Ford has brought against Kavanaugh. And now the Republicans have a problem. They have almost a carbon copy of the Clarence Thomas hearings, which we'll talk about later. But this is not what they wanted or needed at that moment. They wanted Kavanaugh on that bench when the Supreme Court went into session. So when the news blows up, they go cray-cray, as in a whole nother level of crazy that they're already on. They were already operating at a level of crazy. They multiplied that thing. Okay? They went crazy. They do what they knew how to do best, and they attacked the victim. Why did this come out now? Why is she just telling somebody now? This allegedly happened 38 years ago. I'm sure she doesn't remember what she thinks she does. Who is this woman? She must be a Democrat plant to attack this prestigious, innocent white man. And on and on and on. They immediately went on the defensive. So who is this dude? Let's first talk about Brett Kavanaugh. He is 53 years old. He was born and raised in the D.C., Maryland suburbs area. Notice I said suburbs area. He's the product of an elite education. He went to Georgetown Prep. He did his undergraduate and law degree at Yale. He worked as a clerk for Justice Anthony Kennedy, who he has replaced. Same as Neil Gorsuch, who was 45's first Supreme Court nomination. He served as the assistant to Kenneth Starr during the Bill Clinton investigation for 4 years. That is why in his, I'm not even going to call it a statement. It was more like a partisan rant. When he went all off on them, this is payback because of the Clintons. Why would you think they want payback? Did you do something wrong, sir? I digress. Then he also served 5 years under George W. Bush, first as associate counsel, then as staff secretary. He was nominated by Bush to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. Now, this is what blew my mind. That nomination was also just as bitter. This is before allegations. This is before Dr. Ford came forward. This is before 2004. He was nominated to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. The contention around the nomination lasted for years, and he wasn't confirmed until 2006. Okay, so that should tell you a little something about him already. That in 2004, people had a problem with him. Again, I digress. So he also wrote, or was a part of writing, more than 300 opinions on that court, and he has a conservative record. So overall, he's a typical conservative pick for a Republican president. But if you were following this nomination from the beginning, you'll remember that Kavanaugh's hearing was contentious from the start. And contrary to popular belief, it wasn't because of the Trump rage the right wing is touting out. It was because of his record, specifically his time at the White House during George W. Bush's presidency. There were problematic decisions in his record. He was the staff secretary when the whole weapons of mass destruction leads to torture period of the Bush White House was going on, right? So when he got to the hearings, he was missing documents from that period. Interesting. So clearly he was like a great nominee, can't you tell? Well, I mean, besides the fact that he's being accused by 3 different women of sexual assault, and besides the fact that he's probably lied to, or at the very least misled the Senate Judiciary Committee at least 5 times that we know of, the problem isn't his resume, people. It's his ideology. And no, not the conservative ideology, but more so his views on executive privilege and power. On his show last week tonight, John Oliver totally disseminated Kavanaugh for his overwhelming display of rage. And as most night talk shows hosts do, he, with a mixture of humor and truth, broke down the absurdity. The September 27th hearing. However, there was one specific part that stuck out to me the most. Let's listen.
For some of Kavanaugh's most ardent supporters, this is a purely ideological issue. Senators may not say it out loud, but this woman for Kavanaugh did.
I'm hoping he gets in personally because I want abortion to stop. Even if it turns out he's guilty, I think I'm still going to support him, and I hope he gets in because this could be a good chance to overturn abortion.
Okay, so it's fine. It's fine to appoint someone who has committed sexual assault to the Supreme Court as long as they will curtail abortion rights. It's a stance that prioritises human lives. As long as you think life begins at conception, stops right before a sexual assault, and then starts right back up again as soon as that assault is over. Now, obviously, I personally do not agree with that. But even if ending legal abortion is your ultimate goal, there are many conservative judges who could deliver that to you without all of Kavanaugh's issues, because purely as a judge, there is nothing unique about Kavanaugh. Nothing. He's not uniquely qualified. Trump reportedly picked him from a list of 25 names provided by outside groups like the Federalist Society, whose executive vice president explicitly pointed out he had no preference regarding the list.
Is there a leading contender for you?
No, there's not.
Really not?
No, the list is really good.
They're not in order? You're just saying...
No. You can throw a dart at that list, and in my view, you'd be fine.
Wow. He answered that question about Supreme Court justices like he was just asked which pickle in a jar is his favourite pickle. I don't know, man. They're all pickles. It's a pickle jar. So if it's in this jar, it's a f***ing pickle. But, for some reason, the Republican leadership is continuing to push Kavanaugh hard. In fact, on Friday, Lindsey Graham seemed to view Kavanaugh with even more relish.
I've never felt better about him being on the bench than I do right now.
Senator, really? You feel better now than before Kavanaugh testified? Do you really mean that? Or are you afraid that if you don't say it, Kavanaugh will challenge you to a fight on a boat in Rhode Island? Because I do get that. He seems like the type. The point is, after all of this, I genuinely cannot see a single good reason for pushing Kavanaugh over a replacement candidate. Because you know, deep down, any judge they choose is almost certainly going to restrict abortion rights. You don't need to choose an unhinged partisan with multiple accusations of sexual misconduct hanging over him. So it feels like they're doing this just to deliver a f*** you to Democrats, and even more directly, a f*** you to women. Because when this week began, the biggest fear for many was that the committee would not believe Christine Blasey-Ford. But by the time the week ended, it seemed that something darker might have happened. Because it seemed their response was, oh, we believe you, we just don't care. And the tragic thing is, she knew this was a possibility. She said so explicitly during her testimony.
Once he was selected and it seemed like he was popular and that it was a sure vote, I was calculating daily the risk-benefit for me of coming forward and wondering whether I would just be jumping in front of a train that was headed to where it was headed anyway, and that I would just be personally annihilated.
She knew publicly reliving the most traumatic event of her life could have absolutely no effect on anything, and yet she spoke up anyway. It is absolutely incredible the lengths that some people will go to for a free polygraph test.
Now, the question that he brings up is very vital. Why has the White House and the Republican Party backed this specific candidate to no end? What makes Brett Kavanaugh so special that it's this nominee that has to be confirmed? Is it the conservative ideology? Couldn't be. Because there's a list of judges who would vote to restrict abortion rights and marriage equality because you know Republicans only care about abortion, homosexuality, and the Second Amendment. But again, there's literally a list of people who can do that. It's called the Federalist Society, which is basically a cult of right-wing stiffs. You heard the president in that clip that I just played. He said you can throw a dart at the list and pick a nominee. So clearly there's something else that drove this nomination. Again, another point of information. Presidential candidates put out a list of possible Supreme Court nominees that they would pick given the opportunity. It gives the voters a look into what and who they would pick to sit on the highest court in our land and how the court would look under their presidency. So when 45 was a candidate, Kavanaugh was not on his list. In fact, he didn't appear on the list until weeks before his nomination announcement. So how did he appear from thin air? What could have made 45 all of a sudden look to him and elevate him to this position? 2 words: Robert Mueller. The Russia investigation is heating up and fast. I know there's been a lot of other news stories that we've been focusing on, but in the background, Robert Mueller is in his office making sure that his case is airtight. And every single person that he has called in that room has flit and sang like a canary. You hear me? So the judge who openly wrote that he disagreed with the Nixon decision and that presidents shouldn't be held to the same standard as the general public, that they should be able to do their work uninterrupted. Enter Brett Kavanaugh. See where this is going? 45 is in legal trouble. Enter a judge who will sit on the court that could possibly seal his fate, who thinks that presidents can't get in trouble. Wow, what a coincidence. Man, that worked out so well for you. Kavanaugh, right? That's what we call him, Kavanaugh, is even more important because of the seat he will take. Justice Kennedy was the deciding vote. He wasn't one side or the other. He voted the way he felt. You could not classify him by one party. You could not classify him by one ideology. So the replacement is important because it will inevitably shift the court one way or the other. But let's get real. Whomever 45 put in would shift the court conservatively, right? He's acting like he's a Republican, and so that is what Republicans do. I'm sure you all have heard numerous times these news pundits say elections have consequences, which is very true. Elections do have consequences. Whomever is in power has the final say. That's why it's important to vote. The problem I have with that statement is that it's being used by Republicans to basically say to Democrats, shut up, you lost, we can do whatever we want. And to an extent, that is true. The problem I have is that when the 2008 and 2012 elections happened, Republicans did not accept the consequences. Actually, they did just the opposite. They worked together to prevent those consequences. Exhibit A, Your Honor, I'd like to present to you Merrick Garland. President Obama nominated Judge Garland, who on paper is almost identical to Kavanaugh, by the way. And the Republicans refused to even meet with the man. They refused to give him a hearing. They refused to take a vote. And for over 240 days, they blocked the president from doing his job. And they held open not only the Supreme Court, but the federal judge seats as well. That's why when 45 came into office, he's been able to appoint over 100 federal judges and now 2 Supreme Court nominees, all because the Republicans didn't accept the consequences of the election. So they can spare me with their sanctimonious rhetoric. Boy, bye. This is why all eyes were on this specific nomination. It is important and life-changing in so many ways, much like 1990, when Daddy Bush had to replace the first black Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall's seat. Because his seat was so historic, his replacement would be too. At first, Bush nominated Bork, But the Senate said, nah. So then enter Clarence Thomas, a conservative black judge. Perfect! One problem, he's a total creep. So enter Anita Hill, who with poise, strength, and eloquence tried to warn us that Judge Thomas was supreme, just in perversion. Dr. Ford was instantly compared to Anita Hill in the 1991 hearings of then nominee Clarence Thomas. However, I think they couldn't be further apart. Yes, they were both professional women. Yes, they were both reluctant to come forward. Yes, they both had a significant time between when the events occurred to when they came forward. Yes, there are similarities, but let's talk about the differences. Number one, Anita Hill had the burden of not only proving that she was telling the truth, she had the burden of proving that sexual harassment existed. This is 1991, y'all. Women were still dealing with the unwanted sexual advances of their male co-workers. They were still looking at it as men do what men do. Anita Hill comes along and says, these comments and advances were unwanted, and because they were unwanted, it is sexual harassment. And most of America, especially men, did not believe that this was an actual thing. Number two, Anita Hill did not have a Rachel Miller. The Republicans called in a sex crimes prosecutor to come in and, quote unquote, handle the questioning of Dr. Ford so that they could, quote unquote, handle the situation correctly. So for each Republican senator's allotted time, Ms. Miller questioned Dr. Ford while the all-white, all-male Republican senators sat there in silence, trying to look as if they were even remotely interested in what she was saying. And I know that some of y'all are going to say, Ted Cruz is on there, he's not white. Yes, he is. He's white light. Yeah, technically he is from Hispanic origin, but he plays like he's white. So he's white light. Anita Hill, on the other hand, was interrogated by these all-white, all-male senators on both sides of the aisle. Let's revisit just a little bit of what she had to go through.
Welcome, Professor Hill.
Thank you.
Can you tell the committee what was the most embarrassing of all the incidences that you have alleged?
You testified this morning that the most embarrassing question involved, this is not too bad, women's large breasts. That's a word we use all the time. You testified, you drew an inference that Judge Thomas might want you to look at pornographic films, but you told the FBI specifically that he never asked you to watch the films. Is that correct? The fact is, flatly, he never asked you to look at pornographic movies with him. Quote, this is not too bad, I can read it. Thomas liked to discuss specific sex acts and frequency of sex, close quote. You said you took it to mean Judge Thomas wanted to have sex with you, but in fact, he never did ask you to have sex, correct?
No, he did not ask me to have sex. He did continually pressure me to go out with him, continually, and he would not accept my explanation as one as being valid.
So that when you said you took it to mean we ought to have sex, that was an inference, a mere allegation.
Senator, I would suggest to you that for me, these are more than mere allegations. These are the truth to me. These comments are the truth to me.
I'm not questioning your statement when I use the word allegation. I know about sexual harassment and discrimination against women, and I think I have some sensitivity on it. How reliable is your testimony in October of 1991 on events that occurred 8-10 years ago? How sure can you expect this committee to be on the accuracy of your statements?
I guess one really does have to understand something about the nature of sexual harassment. It is very difficult for people to come forward with these things.
I've got to determine what your motivation might be. Are you a scorned woman? Do you have a militant attitude relative to the area of civil rights? Do you have a martyr complex? The issue of fantasy has arisen. Are you interested in writing a book?
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her to plumb the depths of her credibility.
You are not now drawing a conclusion that Judge Thomas sexually harassed you.
Yes, I am drawing that conclusion. That
Well,
is
then I
my...
don't understand.
Pardon me?
Then I don't understand.
Do you have anything to gain by coming here? Has anybody promised you anything by coming forth with this story now?
The witness did not say anything to the FBI about the described size of his penis, the description of the movie Long Dong Silver, about the pubic hair in the Coke. I did think that Senator Specter pointed out some inconsistencies. All we've heard for 103 days is about a most remarkable man, and they scoured his every shred of life, and nobody but you has come forward. If what you say this man said to you occurred, why in God's name would you ever speak to a man like that the rest of your life?
That's a very good question. And I'm sure that I can't not answer that to your satisfaction. That is one of the things that I have tried to do today. I have suggested that I was afraid of retaliation. I was afraid of damage to my professional life. And I believe that you have to understand that this response, and that's one of the things that I have come to understand about harassment, that this response, this kind of response, is not atypical. And I can't explain. It takes an expert in psychology to explain how that can happen. But it can happen, because it happened to me.
Well, it just seems that so incredible to me. That is a most contradictory and puzzling thing for me.
I do not know how Judge Thomas defends himself.
I do apologize to the women of America if they got the wrong impression about how seriously I take the issue of sexual harassment. I must tell you, I must tell everyone else, I take sexual harassment seriously.
Number 3, Anita Hill was humiliated. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that what Dr. Ford went through was somehow easier. However, I do want to point out that during her testimony, there was at least a modicum of trying to handle the testimony and the questioning respectfully and carefully. Anita Hill, on the other hand, was made to repeat lewd sexual acts and conversation over and over and over and over and over. It was clear from the start that they were there to make her look crazy. At one point, Senator Orrin Hatch, who still resides on the committee, by the way, accused Professor Hill of copying scenes from the book and the movie The Exorcist, claiming that her story was not original because some of the same things that she said appeared in The Exorcist. That really happened. At another point, one of the counter witnesses was some pseudo-psychologist who claimed that Professor Hill was an erotomaniac and that she was sexually obsessed with Judge Thomas. Now, I think that we can agree that Dr. Ford has seen her fair share of stupidity thrown at her during this process, but I think that Professor Hill was not only not believed, she was deliberately humiliated. Dr. Ford was allowed the courtesy that she received, although small as it may be. She was given that courtesy because of what Professor Hill went through 27 years earlier. Number 4. Although Judge Kavanaugh was filled with rage during his testimony, he tried his best not to direct his anger towards Dr. Ford, but towards the Democratic senators. Judge Thomas did this as well. However, he invoked the race card, which heightened tensions in his favor. Kavanaugh was angry. I mean, real angry. I mean, turning red angry. But in the midst of his tears and thirstiness, he blamed only the Democrats. Now, Thomas was angry as well, but he aimed his anger at the white senators, Democrat or Republican. Whereas Kavanaugh was partisan, Thomas was bipartisan and hurled the biggest bomb at them that they couldn't avoid, which is why he sits on the Supreme Court today. So needless to say, there were differences. I get why people compared Dr. Ford and Professor Hill. However, they couldn't be more different to me. The bottom line is this: 45 has forever changed the game. The bar is not only lower, but it's dirtier too. Regardless of how credible Dr. Blasey-Ford was, she in the end is like Anita Hill in one major way, and that is despite their courage to come forward, for the remaining of their life, they will have to look at their abuser on the highest court of our land. Have you ever asked yourself why 43% of white women voted for Trump? Why 63% of Alabama's white women voted for Roy Moore? And why some white women stood behind Kavanaugh as fiercely as they did? Why 48% of white evangelicals say that even if he is guilty, they still wanted him to be confirmed? Because when they look at 45, when they look at Moore, when they look at Kavanaugh, when they look at Lindsey Graham, and just about any other repulsive old white guy that there is, they see their husbands, they see their sons, their fathers. Kavanaugh and Lindsey Graham's hissy fit is something that they are well acquainted with. They know the raising of the voice, they know the condescension, they know the vitriol, they see it in their homes every day. So how can they expect more from their elected officials if what they see invokes memories and not outrage? Kellyanne Conway said exactly this in an interview with this week's Jonathan Carl. She said, and I quote, "And a lot of women, including me, in America looked up and saw a man who was a political character assassination. And also, we looked up at him and saw possibly our husbands, our sons, our cousins, our co-workers, our brother." End quote. Dr. Ford's testimony, much like Anita Hill's, will stick with me for the rest of my life. These women had the courage to come forward, to sit down in the most tense and stressful of environments, and they told their truth. Not just in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, but in front of America. They get credit for doing that alone. They also get credit from me for being classy, for being strong, for being dignified through this entire process. It's only the others of the American society that saw Kavanaugh dripping in white male privilege and entitlement. It was only the others and those who have their eyes opened that could see this whole quote-unquote circus for what it really was. The fortunate result of these hearings and confirmation was that due to the outrageousness that accompanied this process, the others now have allies. And with less than a month from the senators' upcoming job reviews, Judgment Day is truly here. And as every free-thinking woman, every minority, every sexual assault survivor, every person who is fed up with the nonsense of this administration, they will walk to the polls on November 6th with the words of Professor Anita Hill and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, indelible in their hippocampus. Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the first edition of the exclusive Taste Talk content. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please feel free to share, to like, to leave a comment. I would love to hear what you think. And look out for more of these because I will be posting a lot more. Have a good night, everyone. Stay blessed.